All right, today we are going to talk about human remains, specifically skeletal remains, and how and what information we can get from them to help determine as much as possible about whoever the victim is. So, forensic anthropology is the field that studies human remains. It specializes in the changes and variations in the human skeleton for the purpose of legal inquiry. So variations and different things in the human skeleton to try to figure out as much as we can about the height of the person, an approximate age range, sex, race, and then obviously cause of death, disease, or any anomalies that might be there. So a forensic anthropologist can provide information on a skeletonized or very badly decomposed body using whole or partial bones to determine as much information as possible. Okay, they're trying to get anything that they can to help attempt to figure out who the person might be and as much information as they can. Osteology is the study of bones. There's 206 bones in an adult human. Okay, and just to recap, kind of before we jump into taking a look at skeletal remains, is the function of bones is to provide structure and rigidity to your body, right? Your skeleton is what makes you not a pile of mush on the floor. It protects the soft tissue and organs, right? Your rib cages, different things like that protect all your internal organs. They serve as attachments for muscles, so it's where your muscles attach to so that everything can move. It produces your blood cells. It serves as a storage area for minerals. And it can detox the body by removing heavy metals and other foreign elements. So if you were to be intaking a lot of iron or lead or something like that, it's going to get stored in your bones. It's how your body detoxes or tries to get rid of it, is it stores it in your bones. So the one we're going to focus on mainly today is how to determine the sex of an individual. That's usually the first thing that they're going to do is try to figure out if the individual is male or female. Right? And that's going to help them to attempt to figure out who the unidentified human remains belong to. The pelvis offers the most definitive traits. So that's where they're going to go first, if it's available, is the pelvis, which is called the os pubis region. There's three main characteristics of the os pubis that gives information to determine if the person is male or female. The width of the pubic body, so the width across, the pubic symphysis, which is this space right here, and then the subpubic angle. So we're going to kind of jump in and talk a little bit about each one of those really quick and show you some examples. So in determining sex, the first kind of main indicator for determining whether someone's male or female is the pubic body, which is just this space kind of from here to here. It's going to be wider in females than it is in males. Okay, so you'll notice like a male isn't as wide across the top here as a female is. That's the first one. So the pubic body is kind of your first indicator. Females are going to have a wider pubic body than males. The second indicator is what we call the subpubic angle. And this is probably the one that I would star. I feel like this is the easiest and most consistent indicator. And in females, the subpubic angle, which is right here, is always obtuse, and in males, it's usually acute. So remember that 90 degrees is a perfect right angle. Anything above 90 degrees is an obtuse angle, and anything below 90 degrees is an acute angle. So in females, the subpubic angle is usually obtuse, and in males, it's acute. So less than 90 degrees in males and greater than 90 degrees in females. And I feel like this is the easiest one and the most consistent to be able to see and recognize. The third factor that they can look for is what's called a ventral arc. Females usually have a ventral arc present, and males usually do not. Sorry, I just kind of went right over top of that. And the ventral arc is right here. It's like this line, and you can see like these are all female. It's just like this kind of addition to the pelvic bone that females have that males don't. And so those are the three indicators, okay? So a wider pubic body for females and males. The subpubic angle in females will be obtuse. The subpubic angle in males will be acute. And then whether or not a ventral arc is present. Those are your main indicators for sex. And then here's, again, some examples. This would be like a full pelvis that they would be able to take a look at, and you can see the pubic body, like the width across in females is usually larger than males in both locations. And then right here, the subpubic angle. In females, it's going to be obtuse, and in males, it's going to be acute. That's usually your biggest tell for a male versus a female skeleton. Height is another one that they'll attempt to figure out if possible. The height of the person that they're trying to identify is it can be calculated by measuring the length of certain long bones. Your long bones are your femur and your tibia, which is like your thigh, the bone in your thigh, and the bone like your shin bone, and then also your humerus and your radius, which is your arm, right? The humerus is the bone that goes from your shoulder to your elbow, and then the radius is from your elbow to your thumb. So those are considered your long bones, and there's equations that go with them, and you don't need to know the equations. You don't have to memorize them, but there are certain equations, and they can plug in the length of the bone. They'll measure it from one end to another and plug it into the equation, and that'll give them the approximate height of the individual. So height is calculated by measuring the length of certain long bones, and then they can get an estimation of how tall the individual was. Age, they'll attempt to figure out the age of the individual. This is definitely just a range. They can't say something, these skeletal remains, this person was 36 years old or 40 years old or 25 years old. They can say they were between this age and this age. The most accurate estimations are from the teeth, determining teeth, the epiphyses, which are your growth plates, the pubic symphysis, which is the pelvic region, and then cranial sutures. Those are like the 4 things that they take a look at to determine age. Using the long bones, the epiphyses, this is probably their greatest way to estimate a person who's a little bit younger. I will tell you that they are much better at determining age the younger the person is than the older. After they get to about age 25, from about 25 to probably 50 or 60 years old, that's the range. They can say they're between 20 and 50. They have a hard time kind of determining anything else. When you get a little bit older, they can start to determine that you were older because there'll be some degeneration of bone, and they're pretty good with younger ages. But that middle range, 20 to 50, is a hard stage. They can usually just say the person's between 20 and 50 years old. So the diaphysis is the shaft, which makes up the length of the bone. The epiphyses are the ends of the bone, which allow for growth. So if you're looking here, stage 1, no epiphyses. There's no growth plate yet. Okay, the growth plate is not there yet. So non-union without separate epiphyses, you're usually younger than age 20 for males, or 21 to 20 years old for males and females. So with no growth plate yet, basically the bone is continuing to grow. The growth plate gets attached to it and stops your growth. So usually age 20 or under will be somebody who has no growth plate yet. Stage 2 is non-union. The epiphyses is there, so the bone is there, and the growth plate is there, but they haven't attached yet. This is usually in your teenage years, so between 16 to 20 years old is usually where you're at for that stage. So most of you guys in class would probably be in this stage where you have a growth plate and you have the bone, but they're not attached yet, so it's still possible for you to grow. Partial union is stage 3, and that's where the epiphyses has attached itself to the growth plate, but there's still a line, like you can see right here, where they attach to, and that's between 17 and 30. So this is usually, most of the time it's your 20-year-olds is where we're looking at partial union here. And then usually complete union, they're going to assume 25 or older. Can be as young as 20, but usually 25 or older, they'll say, okay, now we know this person's above the age of 25 or above the age of 20. Okay, and so that's how they use the long bones to estimate an individual's age. They can also determine age using cranial sutures. So you have your sagittal suture, your lambdoidal, and your coronal suture, and those are just the sutures in your skull. And whether they're completely closed or open kind of gives an estimation as to how old you are. So the sagittal suture being completely open, males would be under 32 years of age and females 35. And then completely closed, we're assuming 26 to 29 and over. So basically, if it's open, you're under 30, and if it's closed, you're usually over 30. And complete closure of all three major sutures in your brain, meaning your brain's not going to get any bigger. Males usually over 35 and females over 50. And so you can see these are huge ranges. Okay, race is another one that they can attempt to estimate. It's the most difficult to determine in skeletal remains, basically because pure races are almost non-existent. So they basically can kind of take and they can place a skull into one of three groups. Caucasoid, which is European, Middle Eastern, or Indian descent. Negroid, which is African, Aborigine, and Malaysian descent. And Mongoloid, which is Asian, Native American, and Polynesian descent. And those are huge, broad categories. They can somewhat say that they're in those categories, but that's pretty much all they can do. They can't be very specific with that. Here's some examples of the differences of the three skulls. You can see like eye sockets are a little different, nose sockets are a little different, mouth sockets are, mouth and jaw lines are a little bit different. But that's kind of just the generics that they can get from that. And you can see for caucasoids, they have long, narrow nasal passengers, triangular palate, oval orbits, which are your eye sockets, narrow zygomatic arches, which are your cheekbones, and narrow mandibles, which are your jaws. Negroids have a wider nasal passage, rectangular palate, square orbits, which are eye sockets, and more pronounced zygomatic arches, which are your your cheekbones. Their long bones are longer and have less curvature usually. And then Mongoloids have rounded nasal apertures, a parabolic palate, which is like a half circle shape, rounded eye sockets, very wide cheekbones, and a more pointed jaw, like a more pointed mandible. And then here's what they look like. So Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid are the three groups. And like I said, they're very broad. So they can somewhat narrow it down, but that's about it. So those are the main things that they can attempt to figure out from human remains. The three that are most common usually are gender, height, and age determination. Those are like your three big ones because that's going to give them the best estimation of trying to figure out who the unknown individual is.